Geek. Talking baseball every week. Because they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, the How the Hell You Doing edition.
We're battered.
I am John Bonus of Alien. How the hell are you doing, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic?
I'm all right. I made it back from Nashville. A little sickly. But we're here.
You are a little sickly. Yeah, that's how people often describe Aaron Gleeman.
Yeah, a little sickly.
the picture of sickly.
I'm not meant to leave the house. So whenever I leave the house for like more than 3 consecutive days, it all falls apart.
I think it's been 2 weeks since our last podcast. I can't really remember. Did we do one?
Our last in-person
Yeah,
podcast.
our last in-person podcast. Yeah. We did do one Patreon in between from the winter meeting. So it was 2 weeks ago today that we did the last free one. It was a Friday.
Yeah.
And then we were supposed to do one this Wednesday, but Aaron's been feeling had a little tickle in his throat.
Well, and we just had so much Twins news to discuss.
Yeah, well, that's true, too.
So we were like, let's wait a day.
There was no real hurry.
We just keep going, wait.
First, Aaron was at the winter meetings, then I was in Vegas, and then Aaron wasn't feeling particularly up to
We just keep going, let's wait a day. Maybe they'll do something. Let's wait a day. Maybe we're on day 400 of that. It's 2028. We're waiting.
How many more do we have to go? That's a good opening question.
Well, I did have a Twins, I think I might have mentioned this on the Patreon.
The 15th.
A front office official at the winter meeting say to me, you're probably good till January if you want to take a break, take a vacation or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that. But the thing I would say, so
January 15th, over or under?
Of like a significant move.
A significant move.
I mean, I'd take the under, I guess, but who knows. But
10th?
the baseball world has sprung into a little bit of action. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani, we can talk about that for a minute.
Yes.
Juan Soto got traded. There's been some other moves. I think it sounds like Yamamoto's on the verge of potentially signing or this week probably. And I would normally say, because, I mean, Derek Fulvey kind of talked about that at the winter meetings, that because they have a few veteran trade pieces that people are interested in. He didn't name names, but we can name them. Right. Polanco, Kepler, Vasquez, Farmer, that type of thing. Maybe some other names, who knows. He felt like, well, we need some of the free agent, particularly on the position player side, to play out a little bit so that the teams that didn't get their top targets or were priced out of their top targets say, all right, well, let's move on to the next option. And if the next option at second base or third base is Jorge Polanco, or the next option in the outfield is Max Kepler, on and on. You can fill in the blanks there. So there's been some movement on that front. I don't think like the Shohei Ohtani signing is a domino effect that's going to get to the Twins necessarily, but I think it will kick into gear. Although I say that, and it's the 15th, and about 5 days from now, things are generally shut down for the holidays.
Yeah.
Anyway.
A week from now, we're going to be doing another free podcast a week from today. And at that point, like for that we won't hear anything in or out of the Twins' offices, I don't think, until January 2nd.
There's not like a rule, but it's...
No, but it's so quiet.
Yeah,
so many people are on vacation.
We've been doing this for a long time. Right. Once in a while, you'll have a move or something. You know, if you have a major trade or a major signing, especially if someone kind of gets wind of it,
right?
From a reporting standpoint,
sure.
You know, you put it through whenever it goes through. If it goes through on Christmas morning, it goes through on Christmas morning, whatever. But yeah, generally speaking, it slows down and then picks up, after the new year. But
nobody in anybody's front office wants to talk to anybody else at anyone's front office because everybody else is gone.
Well, that's right, that's sort of true.
That's about right.
So yeah, I'm back from Nashville. John's back from fabulous Las Vegas. I said to him, "Did you win money?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh yeah," and he said, "Well, I also lost money." So
that's the way it works. That's the way Vegas works.
That's the way to look at it.
Yeah, I had a couple really good runs, and I had a couple not so good runs.
I mean, if you look at it that way, if you buy something for $10 and you give them a $20 bill, you've both spent and made money.
Yeah, exactly right.
Because you got $10
back.
Exactly
right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I like that. I mean, geez, I've never lost money in that case. I've always made a little money.
Well, I've always lost money in that case, but I've also always made money in that case.
Although it's not even true. I definitely have. I've left casinos with 0 pennies, with not a cent on me before. So I guess that doesn't even hold up. Let's talk a little bit about Shohei Ohtani, and then we do have some Twins thoughts. They're more, I would say, fully formed versions of thoughts that we already had on the Twins. In that. Maybe. I don't think the picture has changed that much, but talking to some people at the winter meetings, not only talking to Falvey and Baldelli, but talking to some other teams about the Twins, I had a chance to do that. ran into a few people in some other front offices. The nice thing about being a writer and being sort of an analytically focused writer is a lot of my people I knew 20, 15, 10 years ago, 5 years ago,
are working in various
Baseball Prospectus, Fangraphs, Baseball Primer, going back to all these things, even podcasters and stuff.
Right.
They work in front offices now. I'm pretty much the only one that is unhireable for front offices. And so I did get a chance to run into quite a few of those people and, pester them about thoughts about the Twins, whether had talked to the Twins themselves or just a sense of the Twins. So it's not that we have like some big new hot take on the Twins. It's more I think the picture that we might have of what the Twins are planning or hoping for is a little clearer. So we'll talk about that. There's a few bits of news. I don't know. I sat through another Rule 5 draft in which they did absolutely nothing.
That's amazing. Yeah, but didn't lose anybody.
Falvey even said the night before we talked to him, and I said, "You guys planning to take anybody in the Rule 5 draft?" Just like not meaning to report it. And he goes, we're picking 20th, so it's pretty tough. I might just throw you a bone, Gleeman, and take someone so you can write about it. I know you love the Rule 5 draft. But he said that last year, too, and then they didn't take anybody. Yeah. So the Rule 5 draft is a very strange experience.
I heard as of that night, the night before, there was somebody that they were kind of targeting, but they weren't sure if he was going to be right.
That's what they told me last year, too. Right. Last year, they said they were going to take a guy, and then they just, we decided not to take him. And I had pre-written a thing all about the guy. And so the Rule 5 draft is funny because, obviously people... It's not like it's on TV or anything. So it's literally just in a – so if people watched the day before the Rule 5 draft was the draft lottery.
Right, yes.
With Brad Paisley was there. I was in the same room as Brad Paisley. I'm not like a country music fan, but that was interesting. Saw him for a second. And that was on TV.
Right.
And that's just like a big kind of hall, like where they would have like a wedding reception or whatever, whatever it is.
Yep.
A luncheon. In fact, they did have the manager's luncheon there, and then that's where the Rule 5 draft is. And all the Rule 5 draft, it's not broadcast anywhere, I don't think. Maybe it's on radio or something.
Maybe.
It's just a bunch of like card tables, like I don't know, picnic tables basically, stretched out. I'm not thinking of the right words for these things. It's very early. I haven't left the house in a week. I apologize. Even for me, that's a lot of staying at home. And then there's people at the front with like a computer with an Excel spreadsheet with all the names.
Right.
And there's two microphones on either side. And they say like, okay, first up, Oakland A's. And a representative from the Oakland A's, which is usually somebody from the scouting side or a low-ranking front office person. They kind of pick someone that they think it would be a cool little thing to do. They walk up to the microphone and they say, we're selecting Joe Blow or pass. That's what they say. Right. And you just go until everyone passes, essentially.
Right.
And there's 1 million media members there for some reason because we're all in the media workroom 5 feet away. So we all, waddle over there.
Sure.
And there's also just the front offices and all the scouting directors from every team. Like you could go around, you just recognize everybody. Like, for instance, Sean Johnson, who's the Twins scouting director. Right. He was just sort of moseying around in the background. And so it seems incredibly important in that room. The Rule 5 draft. You're going to change the lives of these 10 guys got picked in the major league portion. 63 guys got picked in the...
I heard about that.
I sat through all of those, which is incredible.
Yeah, they're very active in the minor leagues.
But then you leave that room and you go, well, what was that? That wasn't anything. No one cares. Only the people in this room care, and the 10 players who got picked care.
Right.
So, I've now sat through 5 Rule 5 drafts, I think. And really the only selection of consequence that I can remember, I was there the year they picked Josh Hamilton, who had been sort of out of baseball because of drug issues and then went on to win MVP. So that was a good pick. But that one, people were like, Josh Hamilton, because he was totally out. Anyway, the big news, obviously, is Shohei Ohtani. And not that we have any tremendous insight into Shohei Ohtani, but 10 years, $700 million.
Except it's more like 460.
Yes. The official number was 437 or something like that.
From the Players Union. But for the luxury tax, it's 470 or 468, something like that.
So he basically, 10 years, $700 million is kind of, I remember saying, 3 months ago, that there's a chance it's going to be closer to $1 billion than $500 million. This
Right.
didn't quite
Yeah.
get there, but it
Right.
was close. This is roughly what I thought. I thought he would get more than 10 years because
too.
we saw Bryce Harper
right,
and Xander
yes.
Bogaerts and Trey Turner and all those guys.
He's 29 years old. You can kind of
Well, and just from
maybe 13.
the stretching it for luxury tax
Right.
purposes, we've seen with some other contracts too. I mean, we saw that they tried to do that with Correa in San Francisco with a 13-year deal
Yeah,
too.
that's right.
But he found a different way to sort of make that
it.
same
Right,
effect,
yes.
which is he's going to get $2 million per year. So in terms of guaranteed pay that day, or present day money, it's a 10-year, $20 million contract, which is amazing. I don't think I've ever seen a 10-year, $20 million contract. And then starting at the end of the contract, so that would be 2034, like basically the 11th year.
Right.
He's going to get $68 million per year for 10 years
Right, yeah.
in deferred money. And, I'm no great economist, obviously, but I know that, I'll gladly pay you today or tomorrow for a hamburger today.
Sure.
$1 tomorrow is worth less than $1 today. And like you said, in terms of trying to figure it out for luxury tax purposes, they basically take the, whatever the interest rate, the standard interest rate, you compound it, you figure it out, you backdate it, all that stuff. It's like, 400 and something.
It all depends on what that interest rate is.
Right.
So
you're
trying to
assuming
figure out,
inflation.
Right.
That's
What they
been-
end up using for is like an IRS standard,
Right.
a government issued. Here's how you figure out things for tax purposes, interest rate, right?
And, who knows how that'll play out. But it ends up being, it's still the biggest contract in baseball history.
Right.
In terms of actual value, but it's not the biggest contract in sports history anymore. It loses out to like Lionel Messi and one other deal.
Originally, once you take it back down.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the 700 is
yes,
the
right,
biggest.
right.
And look, he's still going to get $700 million. I'm not trying to like make too much of that, but it's interesting in that for the near term, it allows the Dodgers, who will always be up against and over the luxury tax thresholds, it allows them to basically act as if he's only making 40-something million a year.
Well, 46.
Instead of 70 million a year. And you might go, well, what's the difference? Well, at that luxury tax threshold that they're likely to be at, there's two differences. One is you can just sign someone for 20-something million a year, and the difference between 45 million and 70 million,
Sure.
that sort of creates the space for that. Or you can not sign someone and you just are not paying, $1.50 on the dollar for that extra 25 million, which is like an extra, 40 or 50 million dollars. So that has the bill ends up being significantly less. So it's interesting. They've also, I didn't realize this, but now I read about it. They did something not that extreme, but similar with the Mookie Betts contract, so that they're going to be paying almost, I think, $90 million a year in deferred money starting like in 2030 something.
Sure, yeah. And none of that will be counting against the salary cap, I don't think. Or
Right,
the
the
luxury
luxury
tax,
tax,
right? Because
right.
they've prepaid the luxury tax. It's an interesting deal in that, if they've got a payroll of $250 million, right, outside of the Shohei Ohtani contract, well, they'll only be spending $252 million. If they want to spend more, they can. But their luxury hit is going to be $296 million, right? So that if they end up, if they end up having to, bumping up against the luxury tax, or they don't want to go up from the second to the third tier or 90% or something like that, they still have to be mindful of that the luxury tax implications are still there. They're just not they're not $70 million, they're $46 million.
Right.
And then those implications completely switch around 10 years into it. 10 years into it, if they were at $250 million without Shohei Ohtani, they're going to be having an actual salary, actually spending out $318 million.
With no luxury
with
tax.
With a $250 million luxury tax thing. So it's
The interesting other thing is when you get that level of wealth, your ability to borrow money is very easy.
sure, yeah, right.
And so, you can borrow money under terms that, the average person cannot get.
Right.
And so essentially, Shohei Ohtani is giving them a $68 million
Loan every
times
year,
10
right.
loan at zero interest. over 10 years, which ends up having
that's
sort
true.
of negative
That's true.
interest
Yeah,
for
you're
him.
right. You're right.
And if they're any kind of brains, and they are, I mean, the billionaires who own the Dodgers are, the same guy who owns Chelsea football now and all kinds of other stuff. They can essentially just take that money, invest it in any number of ways, but even like a simplistic way, and they will actually end up making money off of his $68 million.
Pretend, yeah. Yep.
So that they can pay his $68 million, and by the time they're paying him the $68 million 10 years from now, they'll probably have made X number of $1 million from it. So that's also interesting. It's a couple other things from it, and then we'll talk Twins too. But I think this is like a once in a lifetime type of thing to talk about.
But the other thing about that is if they were to do that, if there is apparently a opt out piece, right? So, so the point is that he expects that money to be spent, right?
The other two things are one. Okay, well we'll talk about that one first, which is in the contract. It's the language is interesting, but people clarified he has the ability to opt out if any of, I think 3, but I know it was 2 people. I think the third one is his interpreter. If they fire his interpreter, who's been with him for a while.
Okay.
But I'm certain that it's the owner, the primary owner, whose name is something Walter, I want to say, and Andrew Friedman, who's basically the Falvey of the Dodgers. Came over from the Rays, the president of baseball. I don't know what the title is, but because every front office has different titles. But essentially, if the owner changes, if the Dodgers are sold, or the owner leaves, or the front office head of the front office it moves on or is fired, Ohtani can opt out of the deal. Right. Well, that is amazing for the Andrew Friedman, who's the Falvey equivalent of the Dodgers. You never had as much job security as that.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
It effectively gives him a 10-year contract, right? I mean, like he has all leverage.
If he opts out of the deal, how much of the money is guaranteed?
Well, that's interesting too. I haven't seen that definitively, but I think it would essentially be however many years are completed are that many years deferred. But I haven't seen that definitively. And then the other thing that was interesting, so that's very interesting language. I get it from his standpoint because he's basically saying, I'm the face of this franchise now.
Sure.
And I don't want to get here and have the things that were sort of sold to me in terms of winning and stability. And we got one of the best front offices. We got one of the best ownership. If that changes in 2 years, which I don't know why it would, but let's say it does, I want to be able to say, nah, forget this. I'm out.
I understand the ownership part of it. Like, I don't want this weird contract that I signed with you guys to be a big, thing on your asset sheet that you're going to end up using to kind of just blow it all up and sell whatever, like that. Right. I can see where you're kind of guarding against that with that piece.
Yeah, because he becomes like a piece of art almost.
Yeah, right.
Where someone could say, do you want to buy the Dodgers? You get Shohei Ohtani. Right. It's an interesting little... The GM thing, honestly, it could be as simple as he thinks this guy's a good GM.
I guess.
And this is the guy who negotiated with him, obviously. Yeah. The other interesting part of this, in terms of negotiation, was it sounds like the Dodgers GM or front office boss said this, and then the Angels, he presented this. This was his idea.
Yeah, right. Well, he had this same deal in place basically with the Giants, as I understand.
Right. He offered he presented the same type of contract. 10 years, $700 million, with the 97% of the money deferred to the Giants. And the Giants said, yes, we'll agree to those terms.
Of course, right.
And then he just chose the Dodgers over the Giants, which has to hurt if you're the Giants.
What about the Blue Jays? Do we ever heard anything about what the hell happened with the Blue Jays?
Okay, but so then also, apparently also his agent went to the Angels and said, do you want to match this offer? And the Angels said no, which is interesting. Now, I can't imagine he would have chosen to go back to the Angels at that point.
Right.
But it's a moot point because the Angels weren't going to give him $700 million because the Angels are completely a mess, obviously. Then the other thing is on, what was it, last Friday, I want to say?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. I think that was the day I was going to see you two at the Sphere. So I found out about all this drama about him maybe being on the plane, not being a plane, something like that. I found out about that 24 hours.
John Morosi from MLB Network and one other local Dodgers reporter, I can't remember his last name, reported that Ohtani was on a plane to Toronto from he lives in Southern California, to Toronto. Yeah. And then people started saying, well, Kikuchi, the Blue Jays pitcher, there had been some rumors that he wanted to potentially sign with a team that had a Japanese pitcher or something like that.
Right.
There was some reservation at the best sushi restaurant in Toronto for a party of 50 for that night or something like that.
Wow.
Made by
Yeah.
people thought, who knows if this was true.
Right.
Kikuchi, who's their left-handed pitcher who pitched against the Twins in the playoffs, actually, for the Blue Jays.
Right.
So people were like, oh, my God, he's flying into Toronto.
Right.
He's going to sign his deal. They're going to go out for this amazing restaurant. He's going to celebrate with his countrymen and their families or whatever.
I mean, for instance, when Correa signed with the Twins, that after that deal was done, they all went over to a place in the North Loop and
Spoon and Stable, maybe?
No, it wasn't Spoon and Stable. It was the place off 3rd Avenue.
I should know this.
It used to be Best of Philly Deli, and I forget. I can't.
This is going to bother me. I'm going to ask.
It's like 212 Eatery, something like that.
112 Eatery?
112 Eatery. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I've been
Anyway,
there.
yeah. And the point is, it's not uncommon after signing like that the front office and
Yes.
the players get a group of 30 and go to a high end restaurant and celebrate it.
If I sign my deal with the Athletic that we've been joking about for weeks now, I'll go to Yangtze after that. We'll have the buffet at Yangtze. Dim sum at Yangtze. But turns out that was all bullshit.
Right.
Within about an hour of that,
Right.
our guest, Bobby Nightingale, his father, Bob Nightingale, from the USA Today, who's one of the more prominent reporters of the last several decades, had a very strongly worded tweet that said Shohei Ohtani is not on a plane to Toronto. Shohei Ohtani is in Southern California. He is not leaving his house, like whatever it was, whatever the wording was. And then several other prominent national reporters chimed in to say, yeah, this is not the case.
Right.
And then people were like, "Well, who do we believe?" Because
Right,
if a relatively prominent person reports this, it turns out it was BS. He had talked to the Blue Jays, like they were in the mix for him. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sound like necessarily they were a finalist for him. He was not flying to Toronto. What I wonder is, because leading up to this, there had been some reports that he had essentially told teams he's very secretive, I guess.
Yes.
He doesn't really talk to the media unless he just absolutely has to.
I want to talk about that aspect of it too.
There were reports that he essentially told all interested teams, do not leak any of this.
Right.
Do not tell anyone that you're meeting with me. Do not tell anyone the offer you've made. Do not tell anyone we went out to dinner. And if I catch wind, or his agent said this, obviously,
yes.
if I catch wind that you're the one leaking information to the media,
Right.
I will just eliminate you
Yeah.
as a possibility, whether I want to sign with you or not.
Right.
And so then when a false report of that magnitude comes out,
Right.
and it says, well, for instance, there was one about the Cubs at the winter meetings,
Right.
that the Cubs had gone out to dinner, and there were some, there was called a kerfuffle in the lobby of the GM for the Cubs was not happy about it because there was some people who thought, are other teams planting sort of false information?
Right. Are they false flagging essentially, sort of like,
Or even, I guess it could be true information leaked on behalf of other teams to get them eliminated so that Ohtani would get annoyed with them
That's what I'm saying,
and eliminate them. And so then you see the Blue Jays thing and it's like, well, is this someone kind of burning a reporter in the name of, because, I
in
can't.
the name of trying to mar the Blue Jays' reputation with Ohtani.
I have no idea if that's the case. But what I do know is he didn't go to Toronto.
Right.
A couple days later, he ended up signing with the Dodgers, which it's a little anticlimactic in that, like, that's what everyone guessed. And I remember actually talking to our Dodgers writer mid-season and him being like, it's too easy, right? Like, I'm assuming just because, like, that seems too...
Yeah, I'm fairly sure I've been asked, on the power trip a couple different times, and the answer is just like, well, it's got to be the Dodgers,
They're
right?
just going to give him $700 million, and turns out,
it's on the West Coast. It's a real hugely competitive team, and they got more money than God. Like,
turns out sometimes the right answer
they check all the boxes.
The most obvious answer. So, I don't know. It was, I think, a fascinating situation. On one hand, I'm sad to see him leave the American League in that I just like watching him. Mm-hmm. Like, it's fun to watch him against the Twins. On the other hand, good players going to the National League doesn't necessarily bother me. Like, for instance, if he had gone to the Blue Jays, that would have impacted the Twins in the sense that the Twins, as we saw, are fighting the Blue Jays not only for playoff spots, but in the playoffs potentially. And so, in that sense, although I guess in a way Ohtani and Soto just swapped leagues, basically.
Well, I suppose.
As MVP
fair
caliber
point.
players. I mean, Soto's not as good as Ohtani, but he's pretty damn good.
The privacy aspect of it was a new twist on it from a strategy standpoint for agents, it felt to me. And it feels like a lot of the time what we see is both front office members, but also agents and such will deliberately leak things that that are meant to apply pressure to one side or the other, right? That they're using that, right?
Right. You want to make a team think that another team's in it, or you just want to sort of inflate the overall idea of what a player's market is.
Exactly. And so usually, agents to some extent like all of the buzz that's going around. They tried to not keep things quiet. I thought this was interesting in that by doing this, in a lot of ways, it felt like the circus around it was much more restricted than it would have been otherwise, right? Because there was no circus around it. Nobody wanted to.
Here's my theory about that. I think you're right,
and I think that ends up putting less pressure on the player. That the player isn't constantly not constantly being asked about it, or
Yeah, but nobody can get to him anyway. Here's my theory. He's like LeBron James in that sense, or whatever you want to use. Mm-hmm. None of that matters to him. He's so far above all of that stuff. He can just pick a team and say to them, give me $700 million. And if it's not the Angels, they'll do it. So he doesn't need to inflate his market. He doesn't need to apply pressure to teams. He can just say, here's what I want, and I'm picking you, basically.
Right, yeah, that's right. Well,
so all the other,
even
for someone like Carlos Correa or Aaron Judge, I mean, these are great players, obviously, but they do need to sort of at least have the sense, other teams need the sense that, hey, if we don't up our offer here, this guy does have offers from other places, or this guy, they're jumping in, and we don't want to lose him to our rival, and all that stuff. When you see reports from national media members especially, think to yourself, who benefits from this information being out there? And sometimes it's just a reporter being a good reporter. I don't mean to say that they're only mouthpieces, but a lot of the times it's an agent giving information to a media member because they're trying to have an effect, like we just talked about.
Right.
But with Ohtani, it's not like, now maybe that whole Toronto thing was just one big version of this.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe the Dodgers weren't going to go to $700 million.
Yeah, maybe.
And he just said, tell him I'm going to Toronto. Yeah. Let's see how the Dodgers like that.
Or just call up Kikuchi and say, book a big dinner over there.
You guys go nuts.
And let's make sure that some people know about it.
Go nuts with the sashimi. Get it? Yeah, whatever. So maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I also just think he's so far above that it's like, we saw it. Like he said to the Dodgers and he said to the Giants, here's what I want. They both said, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So he doesn't really need.
Well, it was a very reasonable offer.
10 years, $700 million?
I mean, a lot of, given all the deferred money on it, right? Like
he could have gotten more money. Both in terms of just raw dollars, he could have gotten clearly. Look, if both the Dodgers and the Giants, the two biggest rivals in the National League, basically, were agreeable to that exact contract, he obviously could have gotten 10% more from one of them.
Yes, exactly.
And he could have not deferred the money.
Right.
Now, I don't know that he could have gotten that exact
million,
dollar. Maybe, who knows? The fact that he kind of... But apparently, even while with the Angels... Now, it is California with the Angels, but it's not, the biggest team, obviously.
That's right.
He was making about $50 million a year from like New Balance and other whatever. Well, I have to imagine with the Dodgers, that's going to double minimally. Right. And so from his standpoint, it's like, what do I care if I'm making...
You take a look at it throughout history, like Jordan took away below market contract. Tom Brady took below market contract.
So he's hoping this allows them... His agent gets to say he signed the biggest deal in sports history. When it's really, just the biggest deal in baseball, just the biggest deal in baseball history. And B, he allows his new team some additional flexibility to, at least in terms of roster building, to put a better team around him. And we just saw the Dodgers, I don't know if it's completed or official, but they're trading for Tyler Glass now.
Okay.
And signing him to an extension. I don't know if it's done, but it sounds like that's happening. And so he costs $25 million a year. Well, there's that $25 million that he sort of gave up in terms of luxury tax purposes by having the money deferred. So I don't know. It's fascinating to me. They're coming here.
I don't know. I didn't even look.
I want to say they're here early in the season, like April.
Last year they played in L.A. Yeah, you're right. So this year they'd be playing here.
I want to say April something. The Dodgers are
Okay.
here. I don't know why I know that, but I might have just.
I know they played here early in April 2 years ago.
Perhaps the
like
group,
that.
the beat writer group chat that I'm in might have mentioned that. Who knows? God knows what's said in that
I
thing.
mean, we could just look it up.
Okay, so we're going to talk some Twin stuff and overall free agency too. But yeah, hopefully that Ohtani stuff was interesting. Here's our rule. Whenever someone signs the biggest contract in the history of professional sports, whether it's the Twins or not, probably not going to be the Twins a lot of the time. Most of the time. Half the time, at least.
Sure.
We'll talk about it. But before we get to some...
Let's talk about Grody beef. I got to tell you, I had an incredible steak last night. And that's because for our fee for doing spots for Grody beef, I take it in steak.
Yeah, he takes it in meat. John takes his pay in meat.
Here is why I do that. Okay? You go to the supermarket, you go even to a butcher, you go, that meat is sourced from a dozen different places, right? You don't know. If you want to make sure that you're getting a good steak all the time, the way you do it is you go to the farm where they raise cows in the right ways and have bred cows for 6 generations of family.
Since 1856.
Since 1856,
Minnesota,
yeah.
In Faribault, Northfield.
And you know that you are getting really good effing steak.
Yes,
and
the Grody family, Grote, has been farming, like I said, in a little town of, Nerstrand, Minnesota?
Nerstrand, yeah.
Since
I've been to Nerstrand.
1856. And they will deliver
Yes.
pretty much anywhere in the metro area.
That's pretty much it, yeah.
Or you can, honestly, you can go up there.
You can go to the
get
farm.
your steak and look at the cows and whatever you want to do.
Right. Yeah, and they've got all kinds of great deals in terms of listen, you can just go to their site and pick out individual steaks, but they also now have some holiday beef packages. So if you're looking for something to give that person that's tough to buy for, you look no further. Here's what I would suggest. Get a bunch of steaks from them, serve them for Christmas dinner, and then underneath the tree, after everybody's raving about how good that freaking steak was, so much better, they have a holiday gift package waiting for them of that very kind of steak, right?
Grody beef, Grote beef, GroteBeef.com. And if you use the code word Gleeman,
Yep.
When you're checking out, you get 20%
Off your holiday
packages.
That's right.
And you can be like John. And
Yeah,
just
they also
be
have
eating them.
quarter cows and half cows and all that other
They got
stuff.
everything
Right.
you need. GroteBeef.com. Use the code Gleeman.
That's right.
And then also Game Time. I just watched the Wolves last night. Pretty much ready to plan the victory parade at this stage. Best record in the NBA.
I'm still so bitter that they weren't in Vegas when we were there.
Oh, for the tournament.
Oh,
Yeah,
that was
in-season
that
tournament.
was much more fun. Than
It
I
was
thought
better
gonna
for
be.
them. They got 2 easier games.
Well, that's true. You're
against
right.
bad teams.
You're right.
It was great. Game Time, the Game Time app. You've heard us talk about it before. John uses it to do Twins games, but you can use it to do Wolves games
I've
too.
also used it for Phillies games. I've used it for when I'm traveling.
You can use it for concerts and stand-up comedy shows, all kinds of stuff. The idea behind the Game Time app, it's not a website, it's an app on your phone.
Right.
Hard to find tickets, but also last-minute tickets, which are really good for sporting events.
Flash deals, zone deals.
You're at some happy hour or whatever, and you go, let's go over to the Wolves game. Let's go over to the Twins game. Punch up Game Time app on your phone. You can get tickets.
I've been using it since 2019, long before they started advertising with us. I've been a Game Time app, and it was because it was one of those buddy things. Like a friend of mine was like, you want to get the best ticket.
You can literally
deals.
get the tickets as you're walking to the game, and basically have it on your phone as you get to the gate and show it, and just walk right in. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. You create an account, and then you use the code Gleeman. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but create an account on the Game Time app. Redeem the code Gleeman, Gleeman, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay. Let's see. We got a lot more to talk about. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Been a huge embrace in the halls of John.
That is right. Yes.
We just kind of went,
Big man hug.
Yeah. Just grunt at each other, basically.
And I don't mean the hug was big. I mean the men were big.
Yes, a big man. Yeah, dash, big compound word, big man hug. Let's see. We talked about this on the Patreon more, so I won't got that much into it. But the Joe Mauer is on the Hall of Fame ballot for the first time, and Ryan Thibodeau is a guy on Twitter. I don't remember his name, but you can search it. Maybe I'll link it out when I get home. He does ballot tracking. So there's like, I don't know how many 100 people vote for the Hall of Fame. 600 people. I don't know how many it is, whatever it is. I'm not eligible. I'm six years from now, I'll have a vote. But a lot of people put their votes out, like they write a column about it, or they just post it on Twitter, or they just tell people what their vote is. There's nothing keeping you as a voting member of the BBWA.
You're not supposed to keep it secret.
No, you can if you want. Yeah. Some people do. And so he's gotten a whole team together, and they have a spreadsheet that they track it, and they kind of keep a running tally as these votes become public.
Right.
And they have like 15 so far, and they'll end up with like over half of the tally. Like they'll keep coming in over the offseason.
It's an easy column to do when things are dead.
Here's my Hall of Fame vote.
New Year's.
Right. Here's who I voted for. All that. Yeah. Gets people all worked up, Hall of Fame stuff. So obviously 15 ballots, or however many they have, 16 right now, is not a huge sample size, but it's one of those things where you don't necessarily need that big of a sample, assuming you're not just getting ballots from like one region. To kind of get a sense of where the wind's blowing. And Mauer is at like 80% of the early ballots. Now you need 75%.
Yeah.
I will caution that
this is 15 though, right?
Right. This is a very small sample. Right. And also, even if they get like, let's say they get 300 out of the 600 ballots or whatever it is, and he's at 75%, generally speaking, the ballots that get revealed tend to be more new school or sabermetrically inclined, or sort of. They also just tend to have more players chosen.
Sure.
So that the ballots that don't get revealed are kind of the old fogey set.
Right.
And so I remember in years past, players would be at 78% of the revealed ballots, and then when the actual voting came out, they'd end up at 73%, and you'd go, well, why is it so much lower? It's because the ones that don't get revealed they're kind of not revealed for a reason.
Right.
Because they're worse ballots, at least from my viewpoint. But here's what I will also say. I asked a ton of people who have votes while at the winning. I was in a room with 300 media members, probably half of whom have Hall of Fame votes. And so, not that I'm, Miss Congeniality or anything, but I was talking to people. I said, "Hey, do you have a Hall of Fame vote?"
You are reminiscent of Sandra Bullock.
A lot of people do confuse us
with a beard. Sandra Bullock with a
same
beard.
hair color. Yeah. Well, I don't know if she's gray at this point, but I'm going gray. I got a haircut before I went to Nashville, and my haircut takes about 4 minutes. Sometimes I time it; it's under 5 minutes. I go to Great Clips. If they want to become a sponsor, you guys should. And so basically my haircut is they start with the clipper, the buzzer, and they just buzz the sides first.
Sure.
In my temples basically. And they do the just to start it out, they buzz the sides, and that, clump of hair falls, on your shirt basically.
Right.
And I look, and it's just all gray. That whole clump, and I just think, it's bad enough that at the end of my haircuts, they do the mirror in the back.
Right, yes.
How does this look?
Yeah.
And I want to kill myself.
Right, yeah.
Because that's the worst view. I have no hair in the back, basically. Yep. I'm fine in the front. John and I have the opposite problem. We always joke, if we combined hair, we'd have one full head of hair.
That's right. Or one bald head.
Well, that's
depending which half
I'm up to half full. Half okay, yeah. I gotcha. Yeah, right. We'd have one guy who had a full head of hair and one guy just baldy. As my cousin used to say, baldy Fittipaldi. He used to always call bald people. Anyway, what was I about to say? Oh, I was asking a lot of people. Right. So yeah.
To be fair, you're probably have the same selection bias that Ryan has.
Yes, I'm generally talking to people I know who are younger and more sabermetrically inclined, maybe. Although I did talk to some old schoolers too. But I was shocked. Look, I think Joe Mauer should be a Hall of Famer. If I had a vote today, I would vote for Joe Mauer. Right. I don't really buy into the first ballot stuff. If I did buy into the first ballot as a kind of differentiator, I think Mauer is kind of borderline for that. Maybe if I really felt strongly about the idea of what's a first ballot Hall of Famer versus just a regular old Hall of Famer, I would hold off on Mauer. Excuse me. But I'm now fully convinced he's going to get into the Hall of Fame and I'll even say within the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
I actually think there's a non-zero chance, as our friend Derek Wetmore would say, that he gets in on the first ballot, which if you'd asked me 2 months ago, I would have said, no, he's not going to get on the first ballot. I don't think
I wouldn't have thought so either.
I don't think he will.
I wasn't sure that he necessarily would get in, period.
Right. So I don't think he will get on the first ballot, but I think there's at least a slim chance of it. And he's definitely going to get more than 50% of the vote in my mind, unless I'm just completely wrong in my little poll that I've taken. And we've talked about this. If you're on the ballot for the first time and you even get like 35, 45%, let alone 50, 55%, you're going to get into the Hall of Fame short of something Kurt Schilling-esque happening where people just decide you're an a-hole. And that's not going to happen with Mauer, obviously. So obviously people would love it if it was first ballot and that would mean something extra and you don't have to wait and all that stuff. And I think there's some slim chance of that. But the bigger picture thing is I am so thoroughly convinced now that Joe Mauer will be in the Hall of Fame before I get a vote in 6 years, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that our perceptions on this are probably tainted by our closeness to the local media.
This has always been our theory, right? That he's more appreciated outside of Minnesota.
Well, we've always said that. Right? I mean, we always believed that. But I'm surprised to some extent that you and I didn't factor that in when we've talked about sort of the chances of him becoming a Hall of Famer or becoming a first ballot Hall of Famer, even more so. That nationally, everybody else is like, yeah. This is
the catcher with 5 Gold Gloves and 3 batting titles and an MVP. Why wouldn't he get into
he was the face of the franchise for a decade.
Sure.
And justifiably so. Like he was the name that came through to national, was embraced by national publications and national websites and broadcasts and everything else.
The fact that he was known from the time he was 16,
right,
and he was the number 1 pick, and he lived up to the hype and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
except he didn't live up to the hype here.
Well, right,
but he lived up to the hype everywhere.
That's our
else.
fault. I don't mean you and I just mean Minnesota.
I mean, maybe you and I.
I mean, we talked about that when he was. Well, I think we tried to take the opposite stance quite a bit, but that was our theory, or kind of how we felt as it was happening. I think, which is, I would always tell the story of once or twice a year, somebody from ESPN or somebody
Joe Posnanski stops by
to write a feature about Joe Mauer.
People don't like him?
And they'd reach out to me, or they'd reach out to you, or they'd reach out to some local writer to get a sense of, hey, who should I talk to or whatever. And then they'd always go like, I remember Michael Bauman from Grantland was one of the last ones who did it at the end of his career. And he literally texted me and he was like, do people not like Joe Mauer here? Is this what I'm running into?
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh my God, yes. And he's like, what? And I think that's
right.
When you strip that away,
right,
and you just say a binary yes or no, is this guy a Hall of Famer?
Right.
Anybody from the outside will look at his career and say, yes, is he the greatest catcher of all time? No. Did he have a career that was cut short and even at the front end marred by injury? Absolutely. But that's what happens in
catcher of all time.
Yeah, I think he's clearly a top 10 to 12 catcher of all time, even if you're sort of low on Joe Mauer. And that should absolutely – I think catchers are underrepresented in the Hall of Fame just in general. And so I think that's what we're seeing. And so, yeah, I did think he would be a Hall of Famer, but I thought it might take 6, 8, 10 years. Yeah. I'm now pretty convinced that 2 or 3 years – and I honestly think there's some slim chance it could happen this year.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get people's hopes up.
You don't want to jinx it.
Yeah. You know me. I care about that. So yeah, that's.
You got wood right here.
That was an interesting. And I will tell you, when asking people, "Hey, are you voting for Joe Mauer?" and they honestly, I probably talked to 25 people.
Right.
And 20 of them were like, "Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I?" And I was like, "No, I agree." I wanted to be like, "No, I agree. I just." And they'd be like, "What? It's a weird thing to ask, right?" It's like, "Are you voting for LeBron James for the Hall?" They'd be like, "Yeah." I'm not saying they're the same, but so yeah, that was a pleasant surprise.
That's
I
good.
guess I would say.
Glad to hear it.
Okay, so Sonny Gray, Maeda, and Pagan have all signed. We talked about that on the last show. Tyler Mahle also signed yesterday with the Rangers, a 2-year, $22 million deal.
$22 million.
Yeah. Which the 2-year component makes sense because he's coming back. He had Tommy John surgery in May, late May, I want to say, for the Twins. So they're hoping he'll be a second half contributor
This year.
this upcoming season, and then they'll get a full season.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, he got Tommy John early on in the year. Yeah, everything broke down early on in the year, so they could get a year and a half out of it. All right.
I mean, that's a lot of money. The Rangers have money. The Rangers, I would say, with pitching, whether it's DeGrom, Scherzer, they take bigger risks on the injury front with pitchers.
Yeah, you're right.
Which is interesting. Yeah. It didn't pay off with DeGrom so far, obviously, or Scherzer.
Right.
But I think their feeling kind of is, let's go for the upside and just assume all pitchers are injured.
Well,
so even getting injured pitchers isn't that scarier than getting healthy pitchers. I think their approach, or they just have a bunch of money and they just throw it around basically. But
I mean, compare that to listen, they're not the same pitcher, but you compare that to the Paddock contract where Paddock was not a free agent, right?
Well, going back, I don't know, 7 years, whatever it was, when the Twins initially signed Michael Pineda. He was coming back from Tommy John surgery,
right?
And the Twins signed him to a 2-year deal, exactly like this.
Yeah,
2 years, $10 million. Now that was 6 or 7 years ago. So, he was probably a lesser pitcher, slightly than Mahle when healthy. Although Pineda was pretty good before that. So you put some inflation in there. It's maybe a little bit more expensive than I expected, but that's kind of the deal. I thought. I mean, there was some thought that Mahle would wait until he was healthy and then just kind of sign a deal either for the end of this season or just sign a deal for next season. This way he gets to rehab with the team.
Well, also he gets $22 million guaranteed.
Well, right. I mean, he's yes, I agree. As far as I know, and I did ask a little bit about this, there was no interest from the Twins with this type of deal with him. It's the type of deal that I could see them like I said, they did sign Pineda to this type of deal.
Beyond the
1+1 deal is kind of how these are talked about.
But first of all, it doesn't make any sense for the Twins to really do that because they've got everybody under contract for multiple years. Like, it's one thing if you've got a whole bunch of people who are going to become a free agent at the end of 2024, you might be looking for that type of pitcher, somebody who's going to end up, not being particularly valuable this year, but is going to be part of your rotation. I mean, that's kind of what they did with Paddock last year, right?
I mean, they got a spot in the rotation for him if he's healthy.
But the other thing about him is that, like, beyond the elbow, before it was the elbow, before the Tommy John surgery with the elbow, he had shoulder issues.
Right. I think that's more of it with the Twins, which is like we talked about this at the time. I know Twins Reddit made a kind of a meme out of me constantly. They said Gleeman doesn't even believe he has a right arm at this point. I hate to say it, but I was right. Like I just the way he talked about his health and the way the Twins sort of stepped around talking about his health. Now, like you said, it was initially the shoulder problems in 2022, and then actually his shoulder got healthy and he pitched pretty well for 5 starts, and then his elbow blew out. It just seemed odd to me. The whole situation seemed so strange to me that, like, my spidey sense kind of was buzzing.
Right.
Like, why is this being treated? Why is everyone talking about this as if we've never seen an injured pitcher before? Right. Like, why are we having to act as if he's fine when he's clearly not fine? Why does he say he's fine? And so whether it was frustration with that from the Twins standpoint in terms of his kind of inability to tell them like how he's actually feeling, like he just tells them he's fine and when he's not fine, or just they thought, you know what, he had shoulder problems, he blew out his elbow, we're gonna move on. I also just think $22 million. I mean, they just don't have that type of money to throw at a rehab project basically at this stage. Right. I mean, the Rangers just have more ability to spend that. So I don't think that Mahle was never going to come back here. So those are the 4 free agent pitchers I've already signed.
And it's we did talk Ohtani signed and Soto got traded, right? But that's really about all the movement we've seen on the hitter side. We've seen a lot of movement on the free agent pitcher side, and I still think everybody's waiting for the Yoshinobu Yamamoto
you're
bomb
right.
to drop here.
Ohtani, Nola, Gray, Eduardo Rodriguez, Seth Lugo signed, Kenta Maeda, Craig Kimbrell signed with the Orioles. On the hitter side, Candelario signed with the Reds, 3 years, $45 million. Yeah. And then yesterday or the day before, Jung Hoo Lee, hope I'm saying that correctly, signed a $113 million deal with the Giants. But those have been really the only 2 hitters. That's true. And so to the Twins' point, they need some of those dominoes to fall a little bit. before they can start to do some trade stuff. I guess my biggest, how I said at the beginning of the show, like it's not so much that the winter meetings and talking to people and asking around about the Twins and all that stuff, including talking to the Twins people, but made me think differently about their offseason plans. It more just kind of sharpened or focused what I thought about it. And so I really have three core beliefs about what we're going to see this offseason from the Twins.
Well, let's talk about that right after we cover our
You're such a radio man. They're somewhat tied together. After this break, it's like no. What Chuck Woolery used to say? No zapping or whatever. No surfing. No channel surfing.
Oh, no channel surfing.
We're back in 2 and 2.
Let's talk a little bit about if you are somebody who is thinking about getting therapy. We get to this time of the year. People start
seasonal affective disorder is a real thing.
Well, and I mean, people start getting more introspective at this time of year. You're starting to think about family that you've been around and Christmas and that sort of thing.
Or you spend time around your family.
Yeah, and you need
I
some
came
help.
from that. I need to talk to. This is my.
Speaking of which, I got to just interrupt this thing. Have you seen The Bear? Have you been watching The Bear?
Yes, I've seen.
We finally saw The Bear, the Seven Fishes episode.
The Christmas episode.
Oh my God, so good.
So if you would like to talk to somebody and get some therapy from a real licensed therapist, and they can match you up with someone who can fit whatever you're looking for.
Right.
And the thing I like about this is, if you want to do a video chat, you can do a video chat. If you say, I don't want to be on camera, you can do a phone call. If you say, I don't like being on the phone, you can do just a live chat, like type to someone. They can sort of customize it to whatever your comfort level is. It's BetterHelp.
Yeah.
BetterHelp.com/Gleeman, and you get 10% off your first month. Give yourself what you need in the season of giving with BetterHelp.com/Gleeman today.
Super flexible, super affordable BetterHelp. And then let's talk a little bit about gift giving. Great stocking stuffer is Harry's Razors. I can't believe anybody who's listened to this podcast hasn't tried Harry's Razors by now, because I've been raving about how much I enjoy them for like 10 years and what a great deal it is, and how they just found a good little niche and hack in terms of getting good razors. But not everybody in the world listens to podcasts. Not every, you might have a dad or an uncle or somebody like that.
Some bearded gentleman in your life.
Yeah. Well, or just somebody who's like, there are probably people in this world who still think of Harry's Razors as like, oh, that thing I keep hearing about. Right. You know what I mean?
Get it for them.
Yeah. And they can experience how cheap and affordable it is, how easy it is to have everything just delivered to them.
Yes. High quality razors at a lower price point, delivered right to you, so that you don't have to go to the store and ask someone to unlock a case and all this stuff. And you don't sit and use a worn out razor because you're just too lazy to go get it refilled. All you got to do a couple clicks and they'll just send one right to your door. It's a beautiful thing.
That's right. You can get a subscription that saves you time and money with Harry's. You get started with a $13 trial set for just $3.
Here's what you get.
Harrys.com.
In that $13 value trial set, you can get it for $3. 5-blade German engineered razor with a weighted handle, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover. They've over the years sent us some of these sets, and I always feel like I'm in Mad Men.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Don Draper.
It's really
makes me feel
stuff,
very fancy shaving.
So get a subscription that saves you time and money with Harry's. Get started with a $13 trial set for just $3 at harrys.com/Gleeman. That's harrys.com/Gleeman for a $3 trial set.
Okay. Yeah, and made too much of this. You made too much of this. My 3 core beliefs of the offseason. You made this seem like it was going to be some really big thing.
Hey, come on.
Okay.
We're all waiting.
Number 1. Now I'm like trying to
and
think.
Judging.
What should I say? They're going to trade for Shohei Ohtani. He's wants out of LA already.
Yeah.
Juan Soto's sick of the Yankees. They told me he had to shave. He doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I am amazed that, speaking of Harry's Razors, this is not an ad now, but I'm amazed that still exists, that the Yankees can still force players
to not have beards
in the year 2020.
It is a little stunning.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think getting over the hump was like the 70s. You know?
Right.
You know, like the 70s when people were growing their hair out, and
you would just think the Players
having the
Association
porn
would be like,
stashes.
why are we? Although the mustaches are making a comeback, I know, but
No, not on my face. They're not.
no. Well, I'm always about 2 minutes away from having a mustache. Like I can make it a mustache if you really want it. I say that to Becky, and she says, "No, don't do that." But I always tell the story. This was like we're coming up on 10 years together. Hold your applause, please. Like probably 3 years in or something, we went to a Halloween party, and I went as Ron Gardner.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And so I had to shave my full beard,
Right.
which I normally keep,
Right.
into a goatee, which I never have a goatee, but Gardy had a goatee.
Right,
and then
yeah.
I dyed it. I spray painted it gray, which is a mistake. Don't use spray paint on your face, people.
Oh, no.
Anyway. And also, we went to a party with a bunch of hipsters, and not a single person knew who Ron Gardner was. So I just looked like a guy in sweatpants and a Twins shirt.
You looked like
Some weird Santa
I was
Claus.
going to say, yeah, right, like the snowman guy and Rudolph the Red-Nosed
It was
Reindeer.
terrible. It was a terrible thing.
Burl Ives. You would ask Burl Ives. Also, somebody. Now, that the hipsters might get.
But I remember I went and shaved my beard, and I walked out of the bathroom, and she had never seen me without a beard, like 3 years into dating.
Right.
And she looked at me and she thought, "Oh, you look so young. How long will that take to grow back?" I thought, all right, I get that. So I haven't shaved since then.
That's
basically.
funny.
Okay, here's my three things I've sort of now believe firmly about the Twins offseason, at least in terms of whether they'll be able to enact these plans, complete these plans, who knows. Number one, again, these are not shocking necessarily, but number one, their biggest moves will come via trade rather than free agency.
Yeah, I agree.
I very much think that's the case. Number two, they will trade some/all of Jorge Polanco, Max Kepler, Christian Vasquez, and Kyle Farmer. I will be absolutely shocked if at least one of those players is not traded, and I will not be shocked at all if multiple 2, 3, or even 4 out of the 4 are traded. And then the number 3 thing,
I'm less sure about that, but keep going.
the number 3 thing, they will acquire. Now, keep in mind my first thing where I said their biggest moves will be in trade rather than free agency, but they will acquire a. I saw on Twins Reddit, people were accusing me of being full of it because I said they're going to get a frontline starter, but then I said they weren't going to get an ace. And they're like, what's the difference?
Yeah, right.
And I guess it's semantic. It's worth talking about, I guess. But let me phrase it this way. Number 3, they will acquire a playoff caliber starting pitcher. Now, here's the problem. We've talked about this in the past, so we'll go over it. But because the last thing I would want to do is be misrepresented on Twins Reddit. I like Twins Reddit. I don't mean to be, hi, everybody on Twins Reddit. You could say a few nicer things about me and John, but I like you guys. It's a good.
Nah.
I like to check
Keep
in
us
once in a
humble.
while. Well, and then Doe's active on there. So Doe, when they say something real mean about me, Doe sends it to me and he goes, "They hate you." Anyway, well, I did see the.
I think Doe performed some championship service there.
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Stay with it, though.
Well, I tweeted out there was a whole thread yesterday. Is Gleeman the Geek ever coming back? It made me feel good that people were missing us.
Okay, good. I'll have to check that out.
It's subjective in some sense. Like I've had this discussion with Keith Law before. Keith Law has a very high standard when he writes number 1 starter, number 2 starter, number 3 starter. He means a much different thing than most people when they say that, and certainly me when I say that. And so a lot of people are confused when they read his articles or if they read something he wrote next to something I wrote about the same team, let's say. And he'll say, the Twins rotation is full of number 3 starters. And I'll say, the Twins have a number 1 starter and a number 2. And they'll be like, well, how can these two things coexist? Well, his sort of threshold for those different labels is different. And that's subjective. I mean, that's always, there's not like a set thing for that. You know what I mean? And so
I have in the past tried to sort of sabermetrically
we
define
have
like
talked about this.
what the inning, how many innings do you have to do and what sort of ERA do you have to put up to be, such and such level,
All I can say is how I personally view it. And this has changed over the years, but I have sort of a mindset with it in recent years, which is I view there's a few cutoffs that I would say. Everyone loves to talk about aces. The Twins need to go get. We've heard this for 20 years.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Got to go get an ace.
And it's every fan base, by the way.
Right,
It's
yes,
not just the
absolutely.
Twins fans are maybe more obsessed than others.
But if you say to someone, well, how many aces are there in baseball? And you let them list them off. You give them a list of the ERA leaders or something. You say, well, how many of these guys are inevitably, they'll come up with like 10.
Right.
And you go, okay, well, so what you really mean by an ace is
I want a top 10 pitcher.
the top third of like number one starters.
Right.
Like a number one starter, but like better than most number ones. Like the true, like this guy's a Cy Young, perennial Cy Young candidate, basically.
Right.
Future Hall of Famer, you know, whatever. The Verlanders and the Kershaws and those type of guys, obviously. Okay, that's fine. Then you have just sort of number one starter. And that's where there's a lot of disagreement because some people think of number one starter more like we just were saying about aces. It's like a true, just like a yearly dominant Cy Young. But what I think of a number one starter is, in my head, I think, well, there's 30 of them, right?
Yeah, right.
Now, you can maybe, like Keith Law tends to say, I don't mean to keep citing Keith Law, but Keith Law thinks of it as playoff caliber teams only.
Right.
So when he thinks of a number one starter, he's basically thinking of 15 guys, not 30 guys.
Right.
But I think that's sort of, I don't know, it muddies the waters too much. I'm willing to say that there aren't 30 number one starters because some teams just stink and they're not putting out a representative rotation. But I do think if you're saying how many number one starters are there, if we're listing them off, there should be 20 or 25 of them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, if you go through and as somebody who's done this, if you go through like the previous year and find the top 150 starting pitchers, right? Because that is, 30 teams times 5 starting pitchers, right? You will be amazed at how quickly, like what the average number 3 starter looks like.
People have a much loftier notion
like
of
the average number 3 starter is terrible, or not terrible, but somebody you would not want anywhere near the top half of your rotation.
Especially as workloads have shrunk across the league, like the idea of, well, we just want a guy who throws 200 innings with it. Well, nobody does that anymore. So
yeah, it would be interesting. Like had I known we were going to kind of talk about that, it would have been interesting to go through. Like, let's just take the top 150 pitches, starting pitchers by WAR or something like some blended metric like that, and say, okay, here who's number 30. So here's your last number 1 starter, and here's your first number 2 starter, and so this is sort of the cutoff.
You can basically do that with like projections for the next season.
I'd love to be able to say those names though, right now. I'd like to be able to say, the number 30, first best starter, like your first number 2 starter is.
But okay,
I think we'd be appalled.
So, but well, you're easily appalled. Pablo Lopez is a number 1 starter.
Sure.
Is he an ace? If he has another season like that, maybe. But right now, Pablo Lopez is a number 1 starter.
Yes.
To me, Sonny Gray last season was a number 1 starter, but Sonny Gray in general,
more of a number 2.
Lower end number 1, higher end number 2 is kind of how I would think about it. But then within the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, all that, I have sort of grouped them even together because I find it easier to talk about. I often will say a frontline starter. The Twins need to get a frontline starter. And what I mean by frontline starter is essentially a playoff caliber starter. And what I mean by that is you don't feel like you're screwed if you're putting this guy on the mound in game 1, game 2, whatever it is of a playoff series. And I think we actually saw that play out with the Twins, which is they had 2 frontline starters, Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray. And they had 2 guys, Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober, that they would love to have been frontline starters. But when push came to shove, they were not comfortable treating like frontline starters. They either planned to give them very quick hooks, or they just pitched their way to quick hooks, or some combination of those. And that, to me, is the real separator, which is everyone would love to get 5 aces or 5 number 1 starters and on and on and on. But what you're really looking for going into a season is, if we make the playoffs, do we have 3 guys that we can feel comfortable with actually starting in a playoff game. And that seems simplistic, but we saw it play out with the Twins.
Right.
They only had 2.
Right.
When push came to shove, after a year in which the rotation performed as well as any Twins rotation ever, basically.
Yep.
When it really came down to it, they had 2 guys. And the 3rd, 4th, 5th guy, whatever, they weren't going to treat him like a normal starter. Now, you can argue about that. Should they have treated them like a...
Sure.
But that was how they ended up viewing it. Like,
And by the way, so did the Blue Jays.
yes,
Jays had the same
that's
thing,
exactly
Yeah,
right. They treated Jose Barrios like not a frontline starter.
Well, and I mean, frankly, I would suggest the Astros didn't feel like
Yes.
they had three ace or
The playoffs-
playoff caliber starters.
The regular season and the playoffs are different in that sense, in that it strips away everything. It strips away, and that you have to actually show your hand a little bit, and you actually have to show, what do you think of Joe Ryan? What do you think of Bailey Ober? What do you think of Jose Barrios? And on and on. So when I say I think the Twins are going to acquire a playoff caliber starter or a frontline caliber starter, what I mean is I think they are going to acquire a pitcher that, in their mind at least, if not in my mind and in just overall public's mind, is someone that they would feel comfortable starting in a playoff game, A, and B, treating like a normal starter in a playoff game. Because look, somebody's going to start the playoff game. So just saying the guy's going to... Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober both started playoff games. But that's not really what I mean. What I mean is a guy's going to start a playoff game and be treated like a normal starter. And I don't mean they're going to throw 7 innings.
Right.
But they're going to be... It's going to be treated like a start, not as an opener or as a bullpen game or as a get through the lineup once and get out of here. It's... we saw with Sonny Gray. He wasn't great in the second start.
No.
But it was treated like a normal start.
Right.
There was the potential for him to throw 6 innings, let's say.
The plan was not for him to go one time through the lineup and then switch to another guy. Right.
And so that to me is how I've sort of come to view building a rotation, which is what you need to get through 162 game regular season. A rotation that's going to soak up 900 innings or whatever it is one thing. You need that to get to the playoffs. But then when you flip the switch in the playoffs, it becomes a completely different story, and you really learn who do you actually trust enough to start in these games. And what we saw from the Twins, I think in part because Joe Ryan had the injury issue at midseason and wasn't great down the stretch, and Bailey Ober had the workload issues, and they were a little worried about that. It could be a different story this year.
Right.
I'm not saying those guys can never be playoff caliber starters, but to me, right now, today, the Twins have 1 playoff caliber starter, and they need to add a second playoff caliber starter to effectively replace Sonny Gray, and then the goal for the season should be
Develop a third one.
right. Figure out if it's Joe Ryan, if it's Bailey Ober, if it's
Paddock.
if it's Chris Paddock, if it's Louis Varland, if it's a midseason trade acquisition, whatever the case, figure out a third playoff caliber starter. And so
let me respond to the 3
Okay.
things. Unless you
No,
got
those
some
are my
point.
3. I don't have a fourth.
So let's go through the first one. The first one is
my fourth is going to take a long ass time, and we're going to be bored by the whole.
yeah, well, that's true.
probably
too.
the thing I'm most confident.
The first is the way I actually heard your first, which I would agree with, is you said, they're going to make a trade as opposed to sign a free agent. Basically, my point is they're not going to sign any impactfthe free agents.
Yeah, you could say it that way.
That's the way I would say it, right?
Mine was more poetic. So.
They're going to try. Now, the second one,
flowery language. Right.
I just don't see them making any big splash in free agency, period. Like, I don't know. Honestly, I think we said it at the beginning, maybe a month ago. I'm not sure they'll give out a multi-year deal.
Right.
In free agency. Like, I don't know that they'll sign anybody to a 2-year contract. Right. That might be a decent 50-50 bet, but I don't think I'd take the over on 1.5 years. I think they're going to sign 1-year deals, right? One of those 4 guys will definitely be traded, and maybe multiple will.
That's the one I'm probably most confident about.
Yeah, that one I
got to tell you.
I think there's a better than 50% chance that one of those guys is traded, but I think
I think there's almost, if we're just saying over under of 0.5,
yeah,
I'll bet however amount
10
of money.
to 1.
I would bet however amount of money you want to bet.
How about if I said 1.5 to 1? Is that a good over under?
Better one.
Would you put even odds on both sides?
Part of, like I said, the being at the winter meetings, talking to the Twins people, but also talking to other people about the Twins, clarified this, and this was one of the areas that clarified, which is I talked to a lot of people from, not a lot of people, but handful of people from other teams, some of whom are interested in one or more of those 4 players.
Right.
Some of whom had talked to the Twins about one or more of those players. And some of whom just had a sense of what the market might be for those players. And I just think that in part because where those players are in their careers, which is Polanco and Kepler are now in the last. Polanco has an option for next year, but they're closer to the end of their time with the Twins.
They're in their option years of a long-term deal.
And in Polanco's case, there's some infielders, second baseman behind him, whether it's Julian, whether it's Brooks Lee. There isn't quite that with Kepler in the outfield. I mean, Larnach or somebody could be behind him. With Vasquez, you have Jeffers and Camargo. With Farmer, he's just expensive for a backup. Right. So I think the writing is just on the wall, but I also just think they can get, particularly with Polanco and Kepler, I do think there is a sense that they can get pretty decent value. Now, when I say that, I don't think they can trade one or even both of those guys for a playoff caliber starter like we're talking about. I think they would love to do that. I think they might try to hold out and push the envelope here and show patience and try to get that to manifest itself. Right. But I don't think we're going to sit here in January and say, wow, they swapped Jorge Polanco for a number 3 starter who's going to start a playoff game. Right. If they do, by the way, we'll say what a great move that is.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
I think that would be the goal. That would be the best case scenario. But I just think it makes sense. And then you toss in the payroll stuff.
Yes.
The payroll stuff is a part they're capping themselves with the payroll. They're already kind of up against it. So Farmer at $6.5 million, Vasquez at 10, Polanco and Kepler essentially at 10 each and change. Those are kind of luxury items at spots where you have younger, cheaper guys. Right. Some of them also have trade value. To me, it all adds up to being fairly obvious. And so this isn't like oh my God, Gleeman's breaking news here. But specifically with Polanco and Kepler, I do think that there are teams interested in both of those guys. And I think the Twins can move them for value separate from the payroll situation, separate from having replacements. They can just make a sort of normal trade, do you know what I mean, with them.
Okay, I'm going to break it into 2 groups.
Farmer and Vasquez are a little different.
Yeah, I'll break it into 2 groups. Vasquez and Farmer versus Polanco and Kepler. I think Vasquez and Farmer, if the point is they'll move one of them to free up some salary for some prospects.
Right.
That I feel there's a better than 50% chance of happening. Okay. But let's be clear on what they're going to get back. It's of nothing of value this year.
We saw
it's going to be subtraction, not addition.
Gio Urshela last year, it was the same thing. Which he was owed $9 million. They traded him to the Angels for his name was Anderson Hidalgo, low A prospect.
I would suggest the most likely of them is I think we said at the beginning of the season, I think Farmer is not on the opening day roster next year. I think he is traded, but I think it's going to be. There's nothing about. We're not going to need to do an emergency podcast to talk about the prospect they get back from. They're not going to get a everyday player. I don't think.
Right. I agree.
I mean, perhaps they could get a backup center fielder for something
reliever
like
or something like that for one of these guys.
Yeah, maybe something like that. Right, but not any significant value to this year's. Right. Polanco and Kepler, I don't think they're trading them unless they get back some value for 2023, like a player they can have on the opening. I'm sorry, 2024, right? The an opening day roster player. They have to get back an opening day roster player. I don't think they're going to trade either of those 2 for prospects.
See, they would like to do what you're saying. I think that would be their first choice for sure. Like I said, I mean, if you could swap one or even both of those guys for a pitcher, like we're talking about, that would just be very easy. You could do that. I do think that if you find that is not doable.
Yeah, and I think that is why I am less sure that either of them is traded. Which I don't think it is going to be. I'm not saying it's not doable. I'm saying it's going to be tricky.
I agree with that. But you can also then say, okay, we can kind of make this 2 trades, basically. You can trade Polanco for the salary relief and a prospect or 2 that you like, and then trade one of your own prospects or 2 that you like for a pitcher making $15 million, let's say. Okay. So effectively, it's one trade.
Yeah, I see what I mean? I see what you're saying on that, right.
So you clear his $10 million, which can then be used for a pitcher who's making $10, $12, $15, $20 million, whatever it is, and you kind of recoup the prospect value that you're sending out for that pitcher. You got to be right when you're choosing these prospects and everything.
Right.
And so it's really almost like a 3-team trade, except it's 2 separate trades. Do you know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're
so
saying.
that's one version I could see happening. I do agree that they would love to just make it easy. You send Jorge Polanco and Max Kepler to the Mariners for Brian Wu or whatever, and it's like, that was easy. We got a starting pitcher. We traded away these 2 guys. Boom. We do that.
I think the more likely scenario, though, for what you're talking about is they dump Vasquez and Farmer.
Right.
Well, Vasquez and or Farmer for the salary relief.
Sure.
For even if they have to pick up part of Vasquez's contract or something like that, but they still get some salary relief there, etc. I don't think Polanco and Kepler play into that very much. I think that's
I
less
agree.
likely, right?
They're different scenarios.
Yeah. So as far as I think there's 100% chance one of the 4 will be moved. Perhaps. I mean, I think there's a better than average chance that better than 50% chance that Farmer straight up is just moved, right? And the rest of them.
How you like this? It's more likely that multiple of those 4 will be moved than it is that none of those 4 will be moved. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't think I believe that.
Ooh, we could bet on that.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. We've done 1.5.
Although if one gets traded, it's a push.
Yeah,
right?
it's a push, right? Yeah. Right.
I don't like I hate
Yeah,
pushes.
and I don't really want to bet that none of them is moved. I just don't think that 2 is going to be moved. So
Neither of us have a sister that we can kiss. So
that's it. So I'm not so sure I'm on board with number 2. I
like saying things that you just don't go, well, that's obvious.
Yeah, Polanco and Kepler. I think they want to hang on to Polanco and Kepler. Like,
don't get me wrong. They're not trying to dump these guys.
No, right. Yes.
I mean, we've seen this with Kepler 3 years in a row where it's like he seems like a trade candidate. Why didn't they trade him? Well, because they value him.
That's
obviously.
Right. Exactly.
He had a great second half.
Yes.
And
I think they are only willing to trade those guys if they get back a significant piece for 2023 or 2024. God. And we're almost there. Like, I'm 2 weeks away from 24, and I can't actually remember that.
Well, we're old.
I still haven't figured out that I'm in 2023.
I say 5 years ago for stuff that happened 30 years ago.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, I don't know that they're going to get the offers they want on that. I think that is their focus right now. I think their focus is sort of what can we get? And maybe I am jaded by the fact that the free agent market for hitters has been so slow to develop that it just doesn't seem like there's much interest right now because and I think, we are not that far away from everybody taking a look at this free agent hitting market and going, ugh.
Right. Well, especially if they're starting to get $70 million contracts.
Right. Exactly. Right.
I mean, we've talked about this with Kepler's especially, and I don't even mean it in a negative way, but it does kind of remind me of the Mauer discussion we had a few minutes ago, which is we know so much about Max Kepler and Jorge Polanco.
Yeah, they've got freezer birds.
They've been in the organization for literally, 13 years, 13 years now?
Yeah, right.
There's a freezer burn, not in the sense that we think they're bad players or anything, but just we know what their flaws are. We know all about Polanco's injury situation. We know all about Kepler's inconsistency and struggles with batting average on balls in play and unwillingness to play center field and all this stuff. Right. It's not that stuff isn't known to other teams, but another team might just look at Max Kepler and just go,
yeah, so?
Yeah, he's good. He's good, right? Like, why don't we not want him? He's got 20 homer power. He's a good defender. He's,
Yes.
And so I think there's some of that kind of built in too. I will say I went to lunch. I won't say any details here, obviously, but I went to lunch at the Opryland Hotel one of the days. I had a horrible soup. One of the worst meals I've ever had. But we were
They make a horrible soup.
Honestly, it was the worst soup I've ever had. And my lunch companion, I made them try it, and they were like, "Yeah, this is horrible." It was just
you made your lunch companion try it.
I said, "Am I nuts, or is this the worst thing I've ever eaten?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's bad. What is that?" It was almost like
what kind of soup was it?
It was supposed to be chicken wild rice, which I was like, "Okay, this
brothy
is
or creamy."
I thought creamy, but it was just dirty water.
Yeah,
with like. Anyway,
I made that mistake.
I was really upset. It was very upset.
You got to be very clear on the brothy versus creamy.
It came with like biscuits that were just garbage. So anyway, I was really upset about this. But at the table next to us, was a contingent from a team's front office, which we talked about this on the Patreon. How strange it is to just walk around and you just see, oh, hey, there's the GM of so and so. So literally, I'm at lunch. with another person, and next to us is 5 members of fill-in-the-blank team's front office. Right. And to the point that I recognize them immediately.
Sure.
And I know one of them. And so I just said, hey, good to see you, blah, blah, blah. And I said...
Have you tried my soup?
Yeah, I should have said, can you guys try this soup? It's garbage. Like I'm trying to poison another front office. But I said jokingly, because I try to make a joke of everything because I'm uncomfortable in social situations.
Maybe you got some rice caught in your throat from the soup.
Yeah, could be, yeah. There was barely any rice. I wish there was rice. But I said to the person I know from this front office, hey, can you guys do something with the Twins so I got something to write about? And they said, jokingly at first, well, what do they got going? Like, what? And I said, I don't know. Can I interest you in a lightly used Max Kepler? And they all of a sudden got less jokey and were like, what do you think they'd want for him? And I said, well, and I sat down and I was like, well, they could use starting pitching. And we started talking about it. And I realized that when we hear Max Kepler, we know every possible thing about Max Kepler to the point that we know too much about Max Kepler.
That's right.
We can tell you the ups and downs of every season. We can tell you when he was 16, when he was 26, when he was 30. Right. We can tell you the injuries. We can tell you the flaws. We can. Well, another team, it's not like they don't know Max Kepler. They've scouted Max Kepler. But if you just say to someone, hey, Max Kepler, they go, he's a pretty good right fielder, right? Yeah, we might have interest in him. And so it's like having those type of conversations, even over the worst soup you've ever had in your life. And it was like $22 too, by the way, which, you know me, I'm cheap as Anyway, that really opened my eyes a little bit to the idea of Max Kepler, Jorge Polanco.
We keep saying Max Kepler is pretty comparable to, say, Teoscar Hernandez on the free agent market right now, right? Like next year, I bet you his market is similar, except lefty versus righty.
Honestly, other than Cody Bellinger, and if you're looking at corner outfielders, guys who don't play center, look, everyone listening to this knows I'm not like some big Max Kepler bobo, obviously. I think I would put him, if not number 1, certainly number 2 or number 3 among all corner outfielders in free agency. And so he's available on a 1-year, $10 million contract. Right. So if you're a team in need of a corner outfielder, and whether it's Teoscar Hernandez or fill in the blank, any number of other guys, Lourdes Gurriel, whoever it is, and they're reaching out to them, maybe they do slightly prefer them over Max Kepler, or maybe they want more than a 1-year solution, or maybe they want a right-handed bat, whatever it is. But if those guys are saying to you, I want 5 years, $72 million, or 4 years, $60 million, and then you go, well, we could just trade the Twins something and get Max Kepler on a 1-year, $10 million deal, and then, by the way, make him the qualifying offer after the season and maybe keep him, maybe get a draft pick. So I do think I get what you're saying, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. They're not going to just dump him. They want value. All I'm saying is my impression is that they can actually get value. Now, I've said this in the past, and what the Twins perceive
you say that about every year about Max Kepler,
right? I haven't said it about Polanco in the past, but what the Twins perceive as value and what I perceive as value could be different, which is why I think that the youth coming up behind Polanco and the payroll situation in general kind of pushes them to maybe lower that threshold a little bit.
And I understand that, but I think you're overstating that. To me, it feels like that is. But I could be certainly I could be wrong on this. And then finally, your third point, which is they will get a playoff caliber starter in this offseason.
Yes,
I will say that is what
that's their hope. Yes, I'm not saying they will or they won't, but that's their plan.
Okay, you're not saying they will. I'm saying
these are their three plans.
I agree that
these are their plans.
They are hunting a playoff caliber starter. Like that is their primary goal. That is their big challenge this offseason. I don't know that they're going to be able to get it. And that's part of the reason is why I'm less sure about them trading Kepler and Polanco is like, yes, I think you can get a good, decent 2024 contributor to most teams. The Twins don't need a lot of stuff that you could get for one of those guys. Like they don't need a number 3 starter, right? They don't need I guess they could be, a really good setup man. I'm not sure that they would, even those are fair trades for somebody like Polanco and Kepler for 1 year, Kepler, 2 years of Polanco. What they need is, they need 2 things, one of which is worth less, I think, than Polanco and Kepler, and one of which is worth a lot more than Polanco and Kepler, and I'm not sure how they make a deal. But what they need more, the one that's worth more is they need a playoff caliber starter, and you're not getting that for Polanco or Kepler. And what they need less is a, fill in the center fielder, which I think next Friday when we have our next free, I want to talk a little bit more about the center field market, because by then we'll hopefully know what Cody Bellinger is doing beyond, what the guy the Giants signed.
There is a overall skepticism about the Twins trading for a frontline starter, playoff caliber starter, however you want to phrase it, basically. And I know that people are like, oh yeah, they don't have money to spend in free agency, so they can't go sign a starter. And you say they're going to trade for one, but yeah, that's not going to happen.
But they have done it,
right?
They
this
keep
is
doing
the thing
it.
that I'm confused by.
I agree with you.
People are upset that they lost Gray and Maeda.
Right.
How did they acquire Gray and Maeda in offseason trades for frontline starters?
And
Same thing with
and Odorizzi and
Pablo Lopez.
For that matter. Right. Pablo Lopez. Right. You're
and
right.
So, if there's anything the Twins have done from a impactful move standpoint,
it's a yearly thing. They managed a Paddock, for that matter.
Well, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the idea that they can't or won't or aren't
won't be able to pull that off.
Right. They've done it.
It's a fair point.
4 of the last 5 off seasons?
You're right.
And once at midseason.
You're right.
Now,
there should probably be a better than 50% chance
I'm
that
not
they
saying
do that.
all of those have worked out brilliantly, obviously.
Sure.
The Mahle trade in particular worked out horribly. But they've done it. At the time of the trade, check that box. So at least, I don't know.
And, we've talked a lot about how, the free agent market is sort of rich in those number 2 that level pitcher, kind of like this guy counts as playoff caliber type pitcher. And while I don't expect the Twins to sign any of those, that does mean that those players that are available like that on the trade market may not have as many suitors. Those teams don't have as many teams that are necessarily looking for that. So,
well, I mean, it's also true that the guy they trade for, it doesn't mean they're trading for a 34-year-old who has started playoff games necessarily.
Yeah, right.
It could mean they're trading for a guy they think.
Yeah, could be.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm not even saying it'll be like a AAA guy, although they did that with Joe Ryan, let's say. They also traded for him.
That's a fair point.
It's like we traded for a guy who's a year and a half into his career. He hasn't proven it yet, but we think he'll be a playoff guy. I mean, I'd prefer that, actually.
Yeah, of course.
I guess we can finish on this. I was going to talk about Buxton, but we talked about him a lot on the Patreon. There was a lot of talk of Buxton at the winter meetings because they had gotten his first post-surgery check-in. I would say there was renewed optimism with Byron Buxton. I'm the first one to say that. What does that mean?
You just looked at my face and went, time for the caveat.
I made the same face, believe me. If you'd had a picture of me when they said that, my eyes would have been rolling. I'm trying to be better about rolling my eyes.
Just so we're clear, I'm sure Falvey made that same face when he heard the news about Buxton's check-in, right?
But they're more optimistic. They're at least, for the first time since the middle of 2022, when he got shut down, they're at least talking about Buxton as a center fielder again. Which, there's a lot of time between now and March 30th is opening day or whatever. But we talked a lot about that on the Patreon. I'm sure that, there will be a better sense at Twins Fest.
Right.
It's going to be a process here of him rehabbing and all that. But the thing I wanted to talk about at the end here was there's been so much, and we're guilty of this, focus on the payroll stuff. And I did a mailbag on The Athletic yesterday. I published it. And so many of the questions were a lot of the questions weren't questions. They were just complaints with a question mark at the end of it. That's always the case. But a lot of the actual questions were why should I have any optimism for this season if the Twins are not spending money and ownership doesn't care and, all the common complaints and all that. And I don't disagree with all that. We've talked about it. I think they're making a mistake by lowering the payroll. We've been over that. But I'm not a billionaire, and as I said in the mailbag, I'm not even someone that billionaires ask for advice. So what does it matter what I think? But I do think we've lost a little bit of the plot as a fan base. The idea that the difference between having a $155 million payroll for next season and $130 million payroll for next season is like some franchise crippling, going to blow the whole team up situation. The reality is that's one good player.
Yeah.
And they need one more good player.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not saying it limits their options. It reduces their kind of margin for error. They'd be a better team with $20 million more to spend. Right. Do not get me wrong. But the reality is, their 2024 season is going to hinge on the health of Correa and Buxton and
right.
Lopez and Duran. It's going to hinge on guys like Royce Lewis and Julian building on their rookie seasons. It's going to hinge on Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober taking a step forward. It's going to hinge on guys like Brooks Lee making an impact like Royce Lewis and Julian did last year. Those things have nothing to do with payroll. Like the core of a good team is still there. And so along those lines, I looked up, it's very early obviously, but I looked up both the Fangraphs, they keep like a running depth chart projection. Yeah. And then I looked up BetMGM, which is just a gambling website.
I've plenty of. I've got their app on my phone from Vegas.
Yeah, well, they run I know when I was at the Bellagio, they run the Bellagio Sportsbook.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
I mean, they run
all the sports books?
Like a dozen of the sports books. It's basically Caesars or BetMGM. That's it.
I put a bunch of futures World Cup bets. I remember I had BetMGM tickets on my refrigerator for like 3 months or whatever. We cashed on who did we cash on? Argentina or something? I don't remember. France? Anyway. Those I like because they make you go back to Vegas to cash.
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
I don't think they make you. It just gives you reason to go back to Vegas to cash them. Okay, but so my point, and I'll read them off here. It's very early. Things are going to change. We see the Tigers keep making some additions, and the Royals even signed Seth Lugo and all this. The White Sox are going to make some trades, I'm sure, and they're going to get worse, in my opinion, but the Twins haven't done a damn thing. So, but similar to the Mauer discussion, similar to the Polanco-Kepler, it's sometimes valuable to detach yourself from the Minnesota-ness of it all.
Yeah, that's right.
And just say, how does the world outside of Minnesota view this, not only the Twins, but the division as a whole? And so here's how, and I think this is maybe instructive. Okay. So BetMGM has the Twins at minus 125 to win the division. Right. And what that means is, for the non-degenerates among us, first of all, congratulations for not having that mental problem that I have. You have to bet $125 on the Twins to win the division just to win $100.
Right, that's right.
So what that tells you is they're favored.
Yes, right.
They're viewed as more likely than not.
They're a 55% chance to win the division.
Yeah, 55, 60%, whatever that is. The other teams, Cleveland is in second at, I think, plus 260. And then the Tigers are plus 300. And what that means is if you bet 100 on Cleveland to win the division, you win 260.
Right.
If you bet 100 on the Tigers to win the divition, you win 300. That's effectively 3-1. So that tells you 33.
Yeah, 25%. I think the Tigers have a 25% chance. They think Cleveland has it's a little better than that.
And the White Sox and the Royals are 20-1 to win. And the White Sox are 40-1 to win.
You're kidding me.
People think the White Sox are just going to blow it. I mean, they don't project well as is. They weren't good last season.
Right.
And so the takeaway from that is the Twins are, I don't want to say.
Takeaway from that is I'm betting the over on the White Sox. I'm betting.
Really?
I think so.
I don't know about that. Wait till you see. They're about to trade Dylan Cease.
Well,
for
that's
sure.
a fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point.
See who else. But I know you're a huge White Sox fan.
Yeah, huge. Nervous.
We both really are.
Love that.
We
love that franchise.
Love the White Sox. And their fans.
Yeah.
Great group.
Especially.
But the takeaway from that is the Twins are, I don't want to say overwhelming favorites or anything like that, but they are clear favorites in this division, having not done a damn thing. And the people betting are aware, maybe not to the extent that we are aware that the Twins aren't likely to make some big splash. And so all they're doing is looking at, like I said, the core of this team and the rest of this division, and they're essentially coming to the conclusion, which I've come to, which is this is, if they don't do anything, this is a good team, not a great team, not a very good, a good team in a bad division.
Yeah.
And that's what it was last year, and they won the division. That's what it seems to be this year,
Yes.
or upcoming year, in the win the division. Fangraphs, which is more of a less subjective, more objective, theoretically, look at it. All they're doing is looking at however the Fangraphs depth chart is arranged, where they try to distribute playing time, which I do think they do it generally. I think John Becker is the person behind that, who does it's called Roster Resource on there. I think they do a generally good job. Obviously, you can quibble with some things here, but you look at the Twins depth chart and the distribution of playing time, and at least
the at bats are about right.
Yes,
right.
They have the correct starters in place and all that stuff. The Twins are currently projected to win 90 games.
Okay.
Cleveland is the second best team in the division at 85.
Okay.
The Tigers are at 81.
Okay.
And both the Royals, I think, are in the 70s, and the White Sox are at like 72.
Okay.
Or something like that.
All right.
And so that, by the way, 90 for the Twins.
But just so I'm clear, that they're not playing out the season or anything. They're just taking sort of what the stacked WAR is for those various players, distributing it by at-bats, et cetera.
They're saying if the season started today with the current depth charts in place.
Here's the stats everybody would put up, and then when we combine those stats for those players, here's what you end up with in terms of wins.
Basically,
Okay.
90 wins. First of all, they won 87 last year, so that's an improvement. Is fifth highest in the American League right now.
Right.
They were seventh best in the American League last year.
Yeah, fair.
So I'm not saying that doing nothing is a good thing.
Right.
I'm not saying that that's the path to World Series success or anything. All I'm saying is this sense that the payroll going down or the lack of action is some sort of crippling maneuver to the team, I think sort of loses the plot of they can basically just run it back because of the core that they have, the young players that they have, and the veterans they have, and really because Cleveland is shedding honestly, I just read something today that Cleveland is about to get booted off their local TV, and they're about to trade Bieber just to shed the salary.
Right.
And we know the White Sox are tanking.
You think we got room for him on this staff?
Oh, if you trade Polanco to clear the $10 million, that would be interesting.
That would be interesting.
But so anyway, my point is, yes, I would love to see them have more money to spend. I would love to be talking about trades and signings. We love that. That's what we live for in the offseason. That's what we want to be doing. We don't want to be talking about Shohei Ohtani and all this stuff. But I think don't sort of let that blur the lines of the fact that the Twins are, in my mind, I don't think I'm like overly rosy about this.
Heavy favorites.
The clear best team in a crap division.
Sure. Yep.
And I don't know that that's going to change. I think the Tigers are clearly, they signed Jack Flaherty yesterday to a 1-year deal.
Did they sign Flaherty?
$14 million.
Shoot.
They signed.
I thought that might be the sleeper the Twins
That's
end
an
up
interesting
with.
one.
Yeah.
They signed Kenta Maeda, obviously. I don't think they're done necessarily, but I think, and their projection even now is at 81 wins, which is, borderline contender, obviously. I think clearly the Tigers probably are saying the same things we're saying about this division and saying, I don't know that we're like ready, but what if we just spend a little bit of money here on some pitching, add a piece here?
Well, I mean, first of all, three reactions to that. The first is, even if they go and sign a really good pitcher, that total goes up from 90 to 93, right? Like we should also say 94. You know what I mean? Like that.
Not even.
Yeah, the point sort of is like we're all sitting there going, "Oh, this team just can't do it without." Well, first of all, yes, they can do it without a great pitcher. They can win their division without grabbing a great pitcher.
Sure.
And getting a great pitcher, adds a little bit, but doesn't necessarily they're not going to jump from 90 wins to 102. They're not going to be one of the teams that gets a bye in the American League.
Of your offseason projection is already in place on day one, no matter what you do in the offseason, because 90% of your team is already in place. Right. You know what I mean?
And I think second is that I think most of the fan base would say, yeah, the Tigers are doing it the right way, which is, let's invest some money.
Oh, I agree.
You know what I mean? Right, yeah, which I agree. Yes, I know you agree, but that's why people are upset.
I'm just saying, don't confuse the frustration. Don't let the frustration or the boredom of the offseason blur, like convince you that the team is worse than it actually is.
No, I agree.
Do you know what I mean?
Right. No, but I think the final piece is that the goalposts have been moved a little bit. Now, partly that's because the division sucks, right?
Yeah.
But partly it's because they also had a little bit of postseason success, right? Like coming into this offseason, the goal was not, let's have a good enough team to win the AL Central. Well, we said right at the beginning, this team already is probably good enough to win the AL Central next year, right?
And obviously this bears that out.
And we spent most of this talking about how they need to get a playoff caliber starter. We're not trying to get playoff caliber starter because we want them to be 3 games better in the regular season. Because we want them to be good in the playoffs,
This
right?
is the last bullet point I had to make.
Okay, good.
Which is
like this is why I think you can say now was the time to invest, right? You built to the point where you are an every year playoff caliber team now.
Absolutely. Do not get me wrong. I think they're making a huge mistake by lowering the payroll.
Right.
I think they have clear needs in the rotation.
Right. But don't get carried away with it to the point of saying this is not a good team or but I think this fan base is at the point where I think Randball Stu had a story at Twins Daily like 3 years ago when the Twins were a playoff caliber team.
Warrior poet, Randball
The first week was the headline was something like nothing good can happen for the next 6 months. And it was published on opening day, right? And the thing is we expect you to win the regular season.
Sure.
All we care about is getting some wins in the postseason now.
Yes, I agree. So this is my last bullet point, and we'll shut up, and I'll go home and cough in my apartment. You can't do anything in the playoffs until you make the playoffs.
Right.
And so when we talk about projections and these odds and everything, those are just the regular season. And as we talked about 20 minutes ago or whatever, specifically with the rotation, the things that help you in the regular season aren't necessarily the things that help you in the playoffs. The Joe Ryans and the Bailey Obers and the whoever's are absolutely essential in the regular season, but then you get into the playoffs and you go, do I actually trust that guy to go through a lineup 3 times?
Exactly right.
And that changes. And so I 100% agree. I mean, that's what we just talked about.
When I go to a Vegas sports book, they're I take a look at the futures bet. Now this is just a sheet of paper, so I don't know exactly, but how accurate it is. We get better stuff online, but
John is pointing to a blank table.
It
by
was
the way,
10-1 to be the team from the American League that goes to the World Series, right?
For the Twins, yeah.
Right. And if you were assumed to be one of the 6 playoff teams, even if you're one of the wild card teams, it should be if you're going to be an average playoff team, it's 8-1. That's the way it would be, right? 6-1 or 8-1 to be the team that comes out of there if it's completely random, etc. So already taking a look at where the Twins are in terms of playoff caliber teams, the judgment right now is they're not a better than average playoff caliber team.
Well, there's some percentage that you don't win the division,
you're
obviously.
Right.
But
and it's 31 to win the World Series.
Yeah.
Which makes you one of 30 teams.
Wow, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Which is why the third thing on my list is I think their goal or their plan or their hope, let's say, is to add that starting pitcher.
Right. Yeah.
And I think if you can do that, yes, would it help if you could also sign a reliever and a placeholder center fielder and a right-handed hitting first baseman and all this other stuff? Yeah, I do think they can accomplish some of that stuff regardless. But this team today, without anything, is absolutely good enough over the course of a regular season to be the best team in a bad division.
Yeah.
And then the question is, are they good enough to make another playoff run or a further playoff run, obviously? Right. And I would say the thing missing from that is what Sonny Gray theoretically provided, although he only provided it in one of his 2 starts, and they didn't have a third version of that. They need to have a second for sure, and hopefully a third version of that. And what's the easiest way to do that? Well, it's to trade for or sign, but to trade for that pitcher now.
Right.
And then to hope that...
It's going to be more expensive at the deadline, probably.
Sure.
Right.
And to hope that Ober or Ryan or Paddock or Varland or David Festa or whoever the hell it is can be that third guy by the end of the season. But you can't... To me, it's asking too much to think that you're going to find a second and third guy from the group you already have, which is why I think that their number one thing that they're trying to do and that they should do is add that starting pitcher. But all I'm saying is, regardless of that, that's almost a separate thing.
Right.
Just like the payroll is a separate thing. You can. I'm frustrated by it too. I think it stinks. But don't lose sight of the fact that if we just start it right now, they're probably going to win the division. And honestly, I think it's going to be easier for them in a month because I think Cleveland is not going to add. They're going to subtract. I think the White Sox are going to get worse.
Right?
Now, the Tigers are the one little bit of a wild card here. Like if they go out and sign a couple of position players for $75 million or whatever, then they might have a little bit of a 85 win team instead of an 80 win team or whatever, and then you actually got to go out and win the division. But that's fine too. So that's where I'm at. Okay, we will be back midweek, Patreon style.
Yeah, we don't know what we're doing.
Maybe a mailbag.
Maybe
a post-winter meeting.
Special guest.
Yeah, we could try to get a guest. I'm going to try to get Corey Provis on now that he's.
That's a good idea.
That news has been broken.
Yeah, I'd love to have Corey on.
He listens to the show, so why not?
Corey,
if you're listening to this,
call us.
He might be busy these days.
He might be busy. Yeah,
don't call us. Text us. Call John if you want.
That's right. I pick up the phone.
But maybe just the sort of post-winter meetings. We're all bored. Mailbag would be good. We'll figure something out for midweek. Patreon on patreon.com/Gleeman. Until then, thank you to our sponsors.
Grody Beef and Game Time and BetterHelp and Harry's Razors.
Thank you to John Bonus, who could have chosen to just live in Las Vegas for the rest of his life.
I was there for a week.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot of Vegas.
Especially with the group you were with.
Yeah, well, that's true.
5 minutes is a lot with that group.
That's true. Between the power trip and my brother. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
And the Vikings Nation that was there.
Did you go to the football game? It was a hell of a football game.
My God.
I watched it.
It was so disappointing. That stadium was at least 55-60% Vikings fans. And they just wanted to explode and be rowdy and blah, blah, blah. And, that game just sucked the life out of everybody.
Like not even a game.
And then the Raiders...
Last night.
I'll get to last night in a second. The Raiders fans were, 45% of the thing. They were ready to explode as well because Raiders fans are always ready to explode. They had nothing to go for it. It was 65,000 people. That's what Allegiant Stadium holds. Just going, really? Like, why are we here?
Yeah.
It's
like a dress rehearsal
that
of a
way.
game. I do wonder... How long would they have played if a touchdown was needed? Do you know what I mean?
Right, yeah, right.
And then last night, the Raiders play, what's that, 4 days later?
Yeah.
63 points. 49 at the half.
It was I looked at the half. I
didn't watch that.
I just saw it on a TV and I said,
how is that possible?
That is not possible.
Same quarterback, same team, same.
That's pretty good defense the Vikings might have.
I guess. Or San Diego is the worst.
Or both teams were drugged or something. Like they're pumping.
Were they hanging out with you in the power trip?
Some sedation gas into that stadium. It felt like there was sedation gas in that stadium.
What's it called? Planet. I went there.
Planet 13? Something like that. The big marijuana supermarket outside Las Vegas. Yeah. Did you go there? I've not been there.
On Zach Halverson's recommendation. All right. We'll talk to you then.
Bye-bye.
Gleeman